The wind had been rising all day, tearing across the moors with a hungry sound, whipping the heather into a frenzy and snatching at the edges of the old stone cottage. Inside, Maddie huddled near the hearth, trying to ignore the unsettling moan. She was expecting friends for tea soon, but with such weather, she doubted anyone would risk the trip. Alone in the high room, she busied herself rearranging cushions, humming to keep the fear at bay. She loved the wild isolation of the moorland, but sometimes the silence, broken only by the cries of curlews, wrapped around her like a shroud. Her gaze fell on the antique clock on the mantelpiece. She had inherited it from her grandmother, Morag. Its ornate hands ticked relentlessly forward, reminding Maddie of the passing time. Ever since Morag's death, the cottage seemed colder, emptier, not just because the rooms echoed with silence, but as if something vital had been taken from the house itself. Even the wind seemed to carry whispers of what had once been. A sudden violent gust rattled the window panes, making Maddie jump. The shadows on the wall danced with menace. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine that the cottage was not just old and drafty, but haunted. After all, it had been built on the edge of the moors by her great-great-grandmother, Elspeth, who was rumored to dabble in witchcraft. According to local legend, Elspeth had been able to raise storms at will. Some believed she drowned her lovers in the bog. Others claimed she sold her soul to the devil for knowledge and power. As if sensing her thoughts, the clock chimed 5 times, slow and resonant. The wind outside seemed to hold its breath, and then a knock sounded at the door. Startled, Maddie rushed to the window. Through the driving rain, she could make out a lone figure sheltering on the porch. Relief flooded her. It was just Angus. He must have come for shelter from the storm. She hurried to open the door. Angus stepped inside, shaking the rain from his thick woolen coat. "I hope I haven't disturbed you, Maddie," he said, wiping his brow with a blue handkerchief. "Just come in from the moors. Thought I might wait till the worst of the storm passes before heading home." Maddie smiled. "Of course. Come in. Out of the rain, you must be soaked through." She gestured for him to hang his coat on the rack by the door. They were friends, or at least acquaintances. He was a quiet man with weathered skin and thoughtful eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. Over the past year, Angus had become a fixture in Maddie's life, bringing wood to her when the stores in town ran low and checking on her when the storms raged. For a moment, Maddie basked in his presence, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. But then a prickle of apprehension ran down her spine. The presence of another human being, a presence so grounding and familiar, suddenly felt intrusive. As Angus joined her near the hearth, Maddie fought to quell the panic rising within her. This feeling, she realized, with a jolt, was the same one she had experienced in the shop. When Angus had reached out to steady her, she had recoiled as if burned. Fearful, confused, she hid the tremors in her hands behind the tea cozy. When the kettle began to whistle, the chime sharp in the quiet room, Maddie excused herself to the bathroom. She splashed water on her face, willing the tremor in her hands to subside. What was happening to her? Why was the simple sight of a friend cause such terror? Was she losing her mind? Maddie returned to the living room to find Angus seated near the hearth, his silhouette outlined by the flames. He turned as she approached, and she caught her breath. In the flickering light, his features seemed harsher, more weathered, as if the storm outside had stripped away the layers of familiarity until all that remained was something raw and elemental. He regarded her silently, his gaze intense. And then he spoke, his voice rough as granite. "Are you afraid of me?" Maddie stared back, stunned. How could he tell? She wanted to speak, to reassure him, but no words came out. All she could do was shake her head, tears stinging her eyes. "Then don't be afraid," Angus said, rising. He crossed the room and reached for her, his hands cupping her face. For a moment, she froze, paralyzed by a primal fear. Then, as if waking from a dream, she flinched away. "Don't touch me," she whispered, terrified by the desperation in her own voice. "I'm sorry," Angus said quietly. "I didn't mean to frighten you. I'll leave now." Maddie wanted to stop him, to undo the fear she had unleashed, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. Watching him go, she sank into a chair by the fire, the weight of her loneliness pressing down on her like a physical thing. But then she remembered the shelf above the mantelpiece. With shaking hands, she climbed the ladder and retrieved the box she had placed there. Carefully, she lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on velvet, lay her grandmother's silver locket. She opened it and stared at the miniature within. It was a portrait of a young woman with haunting green eyes that seemed to hold ancient secrets. Who was this woman? Where did her fiery spirit reside? And why did her eyes seem to echo with an unsettling familiarity? When the storm had passed and the sun slanted through the kitchen window, Maddie found Angus sitting on the porch. She joined him, clutching the locket in her hands. "Do you remember me?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. He regarded her for a long moment without answering. Then he spoke, his voice grave. "You have the gift in you, Maddie. It's been here all along. It's your grandmother's spirit." Maddie stared at the locket, unable to speak. The miniatures seemed to glow with an inner light. Why did she leave it to me? And why didn't she teach me? Angus sighed. Perhaps it wasn't her time. Perhaps she hoped you'd find your own path. He paused. Will you accept the gift? Maddie hesitated, torn between fear and curiosity. The storm had passed, leaving an unsettling calm in its wake, and within Maddie stirred a nascent strength, a spark of recognition. She held the locket aloft. Who am I? She whispered, her voice echoing the ancient power within. Angus reached out, his touch gentle as he guided her hands. You are Elspeth, he said, and the moors remember. As the last rays of sunlight faded from the sky, Maddie and Angus stood on the edge of the moor, the wind whipping around them, carrying the scent of heather and wild thyme. In the distance, the sea roared, a constant reminder of the untamed power that surged within Maddie. She was no longer the timid girl who sought comfort in routine. She felt the ancient spirit of Elspeth coursing through her veins, granting her strength and a fierce connection to the land. With a newfound sense of purpose, she embraced the elements, feeling their raw energy resonate with her own awakening powers. Beside her, Angus stood steadfast, his presence a grounding force as she navigated this uncharted territory. Their bond deepened, forged in the crucible of tradition and magic. Together, they faced the mysteries that lay ahead, ready to honor the legacy that had been passed down through generations. And if you enjoyed this tale, remember to subscribe and delve into more stories where the veil between worlds is thin. Each click brings you closer to the magic. Dare to explore, because some doors are best left open.